The United States Navy now controls the Hormuz Strait, not as a warning, not as a threat. 34 ships turned around or seized since the blockade began, every one of them either Iranian or connected to the Islamic Republic. The Pentagon says the next phase is already underway: demining operations, a second aircraft carrier moving into position, and a shoot-on-sight order for any small Iranian vessel approaching U.S. ships or civilian tankers in the area. Trump put a number on it. Iran earns $500 million a day from traffic through the strait. Every day the blockade holds, that $500 million is gone, and he made it personal. He said he blocked negotiations to open the channel himself, because allowing Iran to profit from the strait while its nuclear ambitions remained unresolved was, in his words, world extortion. That is the military picture. Now here is the political one. But first, the strategic context that most of the coverage has skipped over. The Hormuz Strait is not just a choke point for Iranian oil. Roughly 90% of all petroleum exports from the Persian Gulf move through it. That includes Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Kuwait, and Iraq. Every country in that region with oil to sell depends on that corridor. The disruption is not limited to Iran. It is structural and it is global. That is what makes the 6-month demining estimate, which came out in a classified Pentagon briefing, so significant. At a classified briefing for members of Congress, the Pentagon acknowledged something that did not make most news broadcasts. Clearing the mines Iran placed in the strait could take up to 6 months. 6 months of disruption to roughly 20% of the world's oil and gas supply moving through that corridor. The Defense Secretary declined to confirm the figure publicly, but stopped short of denying it. And inside Congress, something else is moving. Senate Democrats, with some Republican backing, are preparing a resolution that would limit the president's war powers. The argument is straightforward. Trump launched a sustained military operation without a formal declaration of war, and the 60-day window under the War Powers Act is running out. The White House is citing that window as the legal basis for everything done so far. When it expires, Congress will have to decide whether to authorize the campaign or push back. That is not a hypothetical fight. It is a scheduled one. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer has already framed the issue in the sharpest possible terms. Congress should not allow the president to spend taxpayer money on a personal military campaign without a vote. That language, taxpayer money, personal war, is designed to force Republicans into a public position. Some of them are already uncomfortable. The question is, how many will say so when the vote actually happens? Meanwhile, the conflict itself has hit a wall that neither side will publicly describe as a wall. The ceasefire reached earlier this month has now been extended indefinitely. The 4th round of negotiations between Washington and Tehran, scheduled to take place in Oman, was postponed without explanation. The White House declined to comment on talks with Iran at all when asked directly. Trump said the problem was that Iran has entirely new leadership now, and no one is sure who is actually in charge. In his words, they are fighting each other for power because we created real chaos for them. What that actually means is this: the United States is maintaining a military posture that Iran cannot fully counter, while Iran is maintaining enough ambiguity around its nuclear program and mine threat to keep the US from declaring a clean victory. Neither side has a mechanism to end the conflict on terms that work for both. So it continues indefinitely. There is also the question of what Iran's new leadership structure actually wants. The factions fighting for power inside Tehran include groups with very different views on whether a nuclear deal is achievable or even desirable. A government in internal turmoil cannot produce stable negotiating positions. Washington does not have a reliable counterpart to talk to until that internal struggle produces a clear winner. That could take months, it could take longer. The political cost of that ongoing situation is starting to show inside the Republican Party. Trump's support among Republican members of Congress has dropped, according to multiple American political analysts, following a sequence of events that each separately looked manageable, but together have created a picture of a president stretched across too many fronts. The Iran operation is not the only one. There is the unresolved trade war with China. There is the pressure campaign against European allies. And there is the Russia and Ukraine situation, where American intelligence analysts are now saying publicly that Putin is deliberately stalling the peace process, preserving his ability to launch new strikes while negotiations appear to continue on paper. Trump promised a fast resolution to that war. The resolution has not come. Russia is still attacking Ukrainian territory, and the Republicans who backed Trump's foreign policy assertiveness are becoming harder to find on the record statements. There is one detail from this week that illustrates the dynamic particularly well. The Pentagon is reportedly discussing the temporary suspension of Spain from NATO as punishment for Spain's refusal to join the Iran campaign. Republican foreign policy hawks, people who spent decades arguing that NATO was the cornerstone of Western security, are not comfortable watching an American administration use alliance membership as leverage against European partners. That kind of pressure does not produce unity. It produces quiet dissent. What makes this week unusual is how visible the fracture has become. One of Trump's own media allies, Tucker Carlson, traveled to Europe and offered what some European leaders described as a personal apology for Trump's behavior toward the continent. Carlson met with several European officials and, according to reporting from multiple outlets, acknowledged that the administration's treatment of European partners had damaged relationships that would take time to repair. That is not a statement a loyal ally makes on behalf of a president who is winning. It is the kind of statement someone makes when they believe the current approach has gone wrong and they want credit for seeing it early. Europe noticed. The countries that have been investing in their own defense, precisely because they no longer trust the American guarantee, have been watching these signals very carefully. And what they are seeing is not a White House that is too strong. It is a White House that is increasingly stretched, managing an active military blockade of a major shipping route, a stalled peace negotiation in Europe, an unresolved trade conflict with China, and now a significant political challenge from its own legislature. The Senate War Powers Resolution is the one to watch in the short term. If it passes with enough Republican support to become binding, it would force the administration into an uncomfortable choice: ask Congress formally to authorize the Iran campaign or begin winding it down. The administration has shown no sign it is prepared to take either option. The more likely outcome is a vote that fails, but close enough to signal serious internal dissent. The Hormuz situation remains the most consequential piece. The 6-month demining estimate means even if a deal is reached tomorrow, global shipping through the Persian Gulf is not returning to normal quickly. The disruption to energy supply chains is already being felt in Europe and Asia. Every day the blockade holds, that financial pressure on Iran increases, but so does the pressure on American allies who are watching their energy import costs rise and their summer travel plans collapse. Here is the honest summary of where things stand. Trump has achieved something no previous president attempted: direct military control over a waterway that Iran used as leverage for nearly 50 years. That is a real and significant accomplishment. But the cost is a 6-month minimum disruption to global energy flows, a fractured relationship with European allies, a Senate that is preparing to challenge his war powers, and a Republican coalition that is visibly quieter in its support than it was 90 days ago. This is not a failure. But it is also not the quick, decisive resolution the White House was promising. It is a sustained operation with no clear endpoint, high costs for allies, and growing political pressure at home. The combination of those factors is what explains the Tucker Carlson trip to Europe. It explains the classified briefing about 6 months of mines, and it explains why Putin is in no hurry to negotiate anything. Watch 3 things in the weeks ahead. First, whether the Senate resolution on war powers gets enough Republican votes to pass or to send a credible signal. Second, whether the 4th round of Iran talks actually happens in Oman and what conditions come with it if it does. Third, whether the Hormuz disruption begins to produce a political coalition among energy-importing countries, particularly in Asia, that puts pressure on both the US and Iran to reach a deal faster than either wants to. If this analysis is useful to you, subscribe now and make sure you have notifications on. Hit like if any of this is landing differently than you expected. Support the channel through super thanks if you can. That support goes directly into research, fact-checking across multiple sources, and keeping this channel independent. No party line, no sponsor priorities, just the story. See you in the next one.